Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2017 movie titled Bad Day for the Cut. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. In the opening scene, we are introduced to Donal, a middle-aged farmer living with his elderly mother, Florence, and spends his days taking care of her and tending to the farm. In his spare time he works on his neighbor's broken car and gets it fixed. While his neighbor is unable to pay him in full for the job, the man instead gifts Donal a broken-down RV, hoping that he can fix it and sell it back for a profit. While there, Donal's neighbor urges him to get out of the house and enjoy his life, but Donal is too loyal to his mother to leave her alone. That night, Florence is going through the obituary in the papers when she realizes that everyone she knows is suddenly dying off and gets worried. Donal offers to stay in to keep her company, but Florence urges him to go out and enjoy himself. Donal heads over to a bar where he tries asking the bartender out when a group of drunk men causes a mess. The bartender heads over to clean up when one of the men begins harassing her. Donal intervenes, but one man begins to berate Donal for being an old man still living with his mother. But before things can get more heated, the bartender tells the young man to leave. Donal leaves right after and returns home to the broken-down RV. He looks around and decides to just keep the RV for himself as a home. For the next few days, Donal works tirelessly on the RV until he manages to get it working. He brings Florence to show her the renovated van, hoping to take her for a ride to the spot where she and his father used to hang out, but Florence gets agitated and refuses. Later she brings him a pack of beer as an apology, and he drinks himself to bed. That night Donal dreams that he is in the forest when suddenly his mother appears before him. As he calls her name, she suddenly screams for help, waking Donal from his sleep. Sensing that something is wrong, Donal steps from the van only to see a cloaked, slender man walking from the house and escaping in a waiting car. Donal runs into the house and is shocked to see his mother's lifeless body on the ground. He calls for the emergency services, and the cops arrive to interview him about the incident. Donal tells them about the two men leaving the house, but the cops immediately start giving him a hard time. A few days later, the wake for Florence is held with a few people, including Donal's uncle Eamon, in attendance. A few days after the wake, Donal is in the front yard when he sees a car speed away from his gate after being noticed. The following night, Donal is trying to clean up his mother's room when he hears a sound coming from his barn. He grabs his shotgun and goes to check it out but gets ambushed by two masked men. They force him to drop his shotgun and then attempt to stage the self-termination of Donal. They put a noose around his neck, but Donal simply lands on his feet as the amateurs gave the rope too much slack. They force Donal to stand aside as they fix their error. Using the distraction, Donal grabs a sledgehammer and attacks one of the men, and they end up in a struggle. Donal manages to overpower the man and smash his head open using the sledgehammer. He punches the other man to the ground and removes his mask to reveal a young, scared boy. He reveals that they were sent to kill him and stage it as a suicide but has no more info to give. Donal considers contacting the cops but changes his mind when he sees the spot where his mother was killed. He gets the young boy, Bartosz, to tell his boss that they completed the job, and they set up a meeting spot for tomorrow. Donal buries the dead man in his backyard, packs a bag, and jumps in his RV, where he has Bartosz bound and gagged. Donal hits the road. He pulls over after a while and begins to interrogate Bartosz about the death of his mother, but the lad has no idea who killed her. Bartosz reveals that he was forced into this job as men have kidnapped his sister and are threatening to hurt her. Donal wants his revenge for the death of his mother and convinces Bartosz to work with him and also save his sister Kaya, to which he agrees. The two get to the meeting spot where they see a van pull up with Kaya and enter the building. Donal grabs his shotgun, and the two head over to the bar. Bartosz enters through the front, where he meets with Gavigan and Jerome, the men who sent him to kill Donal. Gavigan asks for the second man and the proof that the job was done, but Bartosz swears the evidence is on the other man's phone. Bartosz just wants to see his sister and knows he saw her come in, but Gavigan reveals that girl to be another kidnapped girl who tried to run away. As Jerome holds Bartosz, Gavigan reveals a hammer and uses it to beat her to death. Donal, who had entered through the back, sees Jerome disposing of the girl's body and locks the man inside the room. He quickly ambushes Gavigan and holds him at gunpoint, forcing him to drop his hammer. Donal realizes that he isn't Florence's killer, but realizing that he must have an idea, Donal forces him from the building at gunpoint and throws him into the van unconscious. They drive into the forest where Donal cooks a meal for both he and Bartosz. Gavigan eventually wakes up, and Donal urges him to talk, wanting to know why they killed his mother, but Gavigan begins to insult Florence. Out of anger, Donal presses the hot pot against Gavigan's forehead, burning his skin and causing him to scream in pain. After a few minutes, a tearful Gavigan confesses that someone above him wanted Florence dead, so two men went to the home, Trevor Ballantine and the driver, who turns out to be Gavigan's boss, Frankie. Donal tries to understand why they would want Florence dead, thinking that they were just trying to rob Florence, but Gavigan has no idea. Donal leaves the van to take a pee, and Gavigan uses the chance to attack the boy and escape from the van. Donal grabs his shotgun, and he and Bartosz give chase. Gavigan manages to free his hands and contact Trevor, reporting that Donal is still alive. In the car with Trevor is Frankie, who turns out to be a woman, and they both begin to worry. Back in the forest, Gavigan is able to ambush Bartosz and beats him down, threatening that he will kill his sister. Donal suddenly turns up, distracting Gavigan and allowing Bartosz to stab him. Gavigan begins to whimper, begging for the men to bring him to a hospital, but he soon passes away from the wound. Jerome manages to break free and report to Frankie about Bartosz searching for his sister, but they cannot find her since they don't know her name. Frankie gets mad at their mess up and orders Trevor to personally find the girl. Donal and Bartosz bury Gavigan in the forest, but Gavigan's phone begins to ring. It is Frankie, urging Donal to stop before anybody else gets hurt. Donal just wants to know why they killed his mother, but Frankie subtly implies that Florence was involved in something serious and has had a target on her back for years. Donal does not understand but warns Frankie that a target is now on her back before hanging up. Donal turns up to Uncle Eamon's home, showing him a picture he found in Florence's room of a man that is not his father. Eamon reluctantly explains that after Donal's father died, the man, Joe, helped Florence out for a while, and Eamon points out Joe's daughter, who turns out to be Frankie. Donal learns that Joe got involved with the wrong set of people, and despite Florence trying to hide him, he was eventually killed. Donal returns to the van and has Bartosz look up the name Joe and finds out that he was an associate in a string of political murders but cannot understand how it would lead to Florence being killed. Donal is determined to find Frankie and get answers. When Bartosz reveals that Kaya knows where Frankie's base is located and finding her will lead them straight to Frankie. The two come up with a plan to have Donal pose as a customer interested in young girls. He requests to see Kaya, now going by the name Alicia, and a man arranges to meet at a hotel at 6. Donal and Bartosz arrive at the location with Donal wearing a suit. He heads over to the building, where he meets with and hands over cash to the guard and is directed to a room. Donal is checking around when he comes face to face with Kaya. She is very scared of him at first, not believing that he is working with Bartosz, but when she hears her brother's voice on the phone, she calms down and trusts Donal. The two cause a distraction, allowing Donal to knock out the guard. Donal asks Kaya about Frankie's location but realizes that Kaya has no idea and Bartosz lied to him. Donal wastes no time and returns to the dazed guard, demanding to know Frankie's whereabouts. The man refuses to say, so Donal presses a hot iron against his crotch until he talks. Outside, Bartosz is distracted and not noticing Jerome making his way into the building. As Donal gets the info and is about to leave, they encounter Jerome, and a struggle breaks out. The two men fight until bloodied, but when Jerome is about to get the upper hand, Kaya shoots him dead and helps Donal from the building. The two siblings embrace, glad to see each other once more before leaving in the van. A few minutes later, Frankie and Trevor arrive at the building to find Jerome dead and the guard in pain. He swears that he did not tell Donal a thing about her, but Frankie uses the iron to beat him to death. Eventually Donal recovers, and the three turn up to the address that the guard gave up, posting outside to keep an eye out. Donal deduces that Frankie thinks that Florence had something to do with her father's death but swears she must be mistaken. Donal spots Trevor leaving the location and follows him to Frankie's home, where he sees them talking. Donal grabs his gun to end things but then sees Frankie's daughter come to stand beside her and changes his mind. As they are heading back to their camping spot, they're almost ambushed by a gunman but manage to escape unharmed. Bartosz wants Donal to stop, citing that Florence may not be as innocent as he thinks, but Donal pulls over and almost gets into a fight with Bartosz over his comments, and he tells them both to leave for pitying Frankie. Frankie is at home when she gets a call from the gunman informing her of his mess up. She blames Trevor for not killing Donal from the get-go, despite ignoring his warnings to not kill Florence, and fires him on the spot, telling him to leave. Donal arrives at Eamon's home, only to find it covered in blood and Eamon bloodied and beaten upstairs. Eamon urges Donal to stop going after Frankie and to call it a draw with his death. He reveals to a tearful Donal that Florence and Joe had an affair, but when Joe's rivals threatened a young Donal, Florence betrayed Joe to save her family. Eamon wants Donal to stop the cycle of revenge before passing away. As he stares through the window, Donal sees Frankie's car pull up outside. Frankie sees Donal's van outside and sends in one of her men to kill both Eamon and Donal. After a while, Frankie hears nothing from her shooter and decides to go in herself. She sees Eamon's body and that of her shooter but is too slow to realize that Donal has ambushed her. He holds her at gunpoint and disarms her and forces her to get into his van. Donal drives Frankie to the location on the beach where her father was killed. Meanwhile, Trevor is alone in a shop when he gets the call that Donal has kidnapped Frankie. Bartosz and Kaya have gotten themselves a room to rest up, but Bartosz is worried about Donal and decides to go out looking for him. He arrives at Eamon's home with a gun, only to see Trevor there sitting calmly asking for Frankie. Bartosz warns that Donal will kill Frankie and foolishly tells Trevor that he is leaving but gets ambushed and knocked out. Early the next morning, Donal shows Frankie the picture of Florence and her father, trying to explain why Florence did what she did. He begins bringing her to a grave he had dug. Meanwhile, Frankie explains how someone had shot her father before his enemies turned up to finish him off and declares that Florence did it. Donal refuses to believe until Frankie reveals that she spoke to Florence before she died. In actuality, Florence was madly in love with Joe, so much that she actually put him over her own family, but when Joe refused to leave his family for her and tried to end things, Florence shot him out of jealousy, after which she called Leo to cover her tracks. Hearing this, Donal hesitates, and he struggles to pull the trigger. Frankie reminds him of the daughter she will be leaving behind, and Donal eventually stops himself from killing Frankie. As he turns to walk away, Frankie attacks him with the shovel he used to dig her grave and tries escaping. She manages to free herself and grab a gun, but Donal shoots her dead. Donal finally answers his phone, which has been ringing all evening, and thinks it is Bartosz, but it turns out to be Trevor. Donal begs him not to hurt Bartosz, even offering to give himself up in place of the boy. Donal asks to speak with Bartosz, and Trevor hands him the phone. Bartosz barely manages to say goodbye before Trevor shoots him dead, telling Donal to come get him. The movie ends with Donal standing in shock and anger on the beach. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.